Well, after leaving the cheese factory, I headed north all of about 20 miles and found this little spot. I don't think I'm going to walk down to the beach, but it's just a nice view and a relatively level spot to camp for the night, even though it's 10:20 in the morning. So I'm just going to kick back and relax on Easter Sunday and see if I want to leave in the morning. Morning, YouTube. Well, today I'm gonna check out the Cannon Beach area and looking for the couple of different places for Lewis and Clark. And when you pull in to the first thing, there's a sign that says information's that way and RV parking. RVs must park in designated spots. So I pulled into the first designated spot, which turns out to be, oh, I don't know, half a mile away from the next designated spot, which is where the information bureau is. So don't fall for that. Oh, I'm back down. So that whale behind me, that commemorates a spot where Lewis and Clark, their party, came down here to buy whale blubber from the locals. And unfortunately, there's a state park up here, which is the southernmost one with for Lewis and Clark, and it's closed. There's some damage to the entrance, so there's no way to get in there. So I'm not going to be able to see it this time, but there's some more up along the coast, and we'll be heading up that way. But first, one of the nice things about Oregon is that in 1913, the governor at the time designated all the Oregon beaches as a public highway, so they are publicly owned. There was a move in the 1960s to develop some of them, make some of it private, and the government at that time passed a law that got signed in 1967 that all Oregon beaches are owned by the public, so they are free for everybody. Unlike in many other states, California especially, where people have these villas and own the beach and you're not allowed to play on it, here, as long as you get down to it, it's free for public use. Pretty nice. Okay, so here's Lewis and Clark, end of the trail. This is where they hit the Pacific Ocean, and for some reason, you're standing on their dog. I figured out why. Why would you stand on your dog? But anyway, maybe just hold them down. So I'm gonna head down here where they had the guys making salt, and get out of the rain that all of a sudden came up. So it took a little doing. But this is a recreation, I'm sure, of the saltworks that Lewis and Clark had on this site or close by it. Basically, they had traveled 4,000 miles across the country. Had in that time had used up pretty much all of their salt, so they sent a couple guys down here to establish a camp, and they kept them, and they rotated staff through, and over the course of couple of months, they boiled salt water down in salt and got enough that they could to carry them all the way back. Of course, they use the salt for preserving food, which would have been the 130 elk that they shot that winter. I'm sure they preserved a whole lot of that for the trip back. But as again, I'm pretty sure, you know, this is a recreation, but this is pretty much how they would have been doing it, just boiling down salt water and getting a very nice fine white salt. Okay, so today I'm at Fort Clatsop, which is where Lewis and Clark and the expedition spent the winter. They got to the Pacific in November of 1805, and this is, like I said, this is where they spent the winter, and repairs and restocked up. We already saw the salt works, and where they went down and got some whale blubber. I found it interesting is that with the whale, I learned later that they Lewis described it as tasting a lot like pork fat, and when he had it fried up. So Lewis liked bacon. So I'm gonna take a look around. Yeah, this would have been a typical bunk room, you know. Wooden planks, got a fireplace, rudimentary, just a wooden chimney, but it would have worked really nicely. And these guys had the luxury, they had a chair. So let's go take a look at what the officers' quarters look like. The only reason this is
this here, and we'll make sure you get it later. If you want to go do your did you do your garden area? You wrote the name up there, sweetie? Yep. Okay. All right. I don't know if she's right on your garden.
So of course, when people think of Lewis and Clark, they always think of Sacagawea and Jean-Baptiste, the baby that came along with them, and was surprisingly instrumental in getting them farther along when they ran into her brother, who was the chief of the Shoshone. I wonder what the Paul Smith's canoe team could do with that. All right, so that ends my visit to Fort Clatsop, where Lewis and Clark spent the winter. There's a trail here, it goes down to where down the seaside, where the salt works are, and the Pacific coast. So I'm going to get back on the road. I'm not sure if there's any more Lewis and Clark stuff on the other side of the Columbia, but we're going to head that way, and going to be going across a very big, very famous bridge, and I'll tell you about that when we get closer.